Hi everyone, I'm Marissa and I'm here to talk about human design. Um, I want to explore all of the gates and the lines of each gate and just put out some education about the gene keys as well and some contemplations from quantum human design. So this is my first video I'm ever making, so bear with me, but I'm going to start with gate 1, the creative. I have this gate in my Pluto, unconscious and conscious. So this is like the primordial, start of everything. This knowledge all comes from the I Ching, which is the Book of Changes, thousands of years old, and then human design, which I love, is was downloaded to Ra Uru Hu in 1987, and he was given the cosmology, and he was able to synthesize this amazing system called human design. It's a synthesis of astrology, the I Ching, the Kabbalah, quantum physics, biology. It literally is our genetic makeup. It's an amazing system, and it will change your life. So, here we go. First, I'm going to read the shadow is entropy, the gift is freshness, and the city is beauty. The element is water. The astrological sign is Scorpio. It's in the identity center of the body graph, and it connects to the 8th gate, which is the channel of the creative role model. So the repressive nature is depressive. The reactive nature is frenetic, and the victim pattern is numbness. Now, I know this gene key very well, obviously, because I have it. Entropy. It's like you need to rest. Don't make up mental stories, or you can fall into that trap of depression. Yeah, you definitely just need to rest, and then something new will bloom. What else do I want to say about this before I start reading the lines from Ra Uru Hu's Rave I Ching? I'm doing this for my own purposes so that I have the information in video format of each of the lines and all of the information about each gate. Hopefully it's helpful for other people, because when I was learning human design, I was looking for videos that had all the information about each gate. So I hope this is helpful for someone else. Okay. I think the amino acids are very important, and you can get a lot of information about your health through the human design chart and the human design dream rave chart. You can check out Vicki McHale. She does really great work finding the patterns of vulnerabilities of different potential illness that you can get depending on your charts. So the amino acid is lysine, and it's also associated with the liver. It's in the codon ring of fire. The programming partner is gate 2, which is the receptive, which is where the magnetic monopole lies. So the first gate is like the most masculine, and the second is like the most feminine. So people who have the channel 1-8 are inspiring. They're kind of like have a leadership type vibe to them. It's individual energy in the individual circuit, so it's transformative, it's mutative energy. Okay, now I'm going to go to the Rave I Ching that Ra Uru Hu created, and I'm going to read off the lines of the one. Bear with me, I'm so sorry. This is my first time ever doing this. My computer could be any slower. Okay, here we go. Okay, so hexagram 1, the creative. The first and second hexagrams are essentially the same. That is, the first hexagram remains closest in spirit to the direction of the second hexagram because there is neither projection or reflection. There is simply the spontaneous release of direction as the expression of the self. Here in the first gate, we're dealing with a roll gate. We have 6 roll gates, 2 of them in the sacral center and 4 of them are in the G center. 3 of the 4 gates in the G are part of the cross of Sphinx. The 10th gate is the part of the vessel of love. Wherever you see a roll gate in somebody's design, you know right away that this is something that dominates them as a theme. It's to live out the essence or nature of that role. The role that is inherent in the first hexagram is to express uniqueness. In the crudest language, it's simply to express mutation. By expressing uniqueness and mutation, we are speaking the same thing. This is the difference that is always possible for the individual. In the first hexagram, like in the second, we have the repetition above the line of this term primal. These are primal forces. They divide the yin and the yang of the wheel. The 6 yin lines of the receptive hexagram 2 and the 6 yang lines of the creative. Creation as a primal force. We have receptivity as a primal base and creation as a primal force. The energy potential to manifest inspiration without limitation. Potential is a key word because so many things are going on to be necessary. To manifest inspiration without limitation is a very important term to grasp. Mutation knows no boundary. Mutation follows no structure or order. Mutation is something that simply jumps. Remember, everything that has to do with the 1 and the 2 is all rooted in the center tantric movement in a way that we have this pulsing in the individual process. The mutative pulse, the on or the off. The most important thing for anybody who carries this first gate or gene key is the recognition that the first gate does not have to be best. To be best is collective. When there is nothing new, everybody is competing to see who can be best. But when there is something new, no best exists. It's just new. Individuality always brings what's new, and as such, I cannot lead, I cannot project, I cannot witness, and I cannot reflect. I can only live out that nature. That is why, with this energy, the potential to manifest inspiration is unlimited, because the mutation transcends limitation. Okay, so gate 1, line 1. Creation is independent of will. The first line always speaks for the nature of the hexagram. Here we have the relationship between the self and the ego. The first thing we hear is that the creation is independent of will. Right away, you have this keynote that says, look, this is not about what your ego is doing. This is not about your ego claiming that it is a creative force. The ego is just a motor. Unique direction is not about willpower. I'll do something that nobody else has ever done. Only somebody collective could say something done like that, because to do something that nobody else has ever done is a mutation and can only happen. We cannot create. It is independent of will. The moon exalted as the symbol of adaptation. Time is everything. This is so important to understand about mutation. It follows its own law. You have to wait for it, and there is nothing that you can do. Remember that this is a first line. It's not transpersonal. It does not know that there is an eighth gate on the other side that's ready to make a contribution. It does not know that it can make the contribution. There's just the deep impulse to express one's uniqueness. Time is everything. Uranus in detriment. Instability leads to distortion. Here, patience is a virtue and revolution a vice. In the White Book, the Uranus in detriment creative instability unless there is patience. That is much more clearly stated there. In other words, you can't be an example right away. So many individuals go through life trying to be like the collective until that moment of mutation. You have to be patient. If you are, it will come. The moment you try to control it, the moment you try to drive it with willpower, then you become unstable. I have been creative all my life. Every time my big ego tried to tell me that it was time to create, I would end up with enormous frustration. In those moments where the last thing on earth I wanted to do was create anything, I will be driven to do it if that is the mechanism. You learn in time. Patience is a great teacher. Revolution, the desire out of the ego to express creativity and to do it when you want to do it, leads to distortion. I have my south node there. Time is everything. I had to wait nearly 40 years. So this is, again, I'm quoting Roz Ravi Ching, so that's not about me. Okay, so Gate 1, Line 2. Love is light. With individuality, you are dealing with a number of things. First of all, we are dealing with people that are not designed to be interfered with. In individual gates, you do not allow anybody to interfere. We are in the lower trigram here, so the individual here does not even expect that there is somebody that is going to interfere. The other thing that all individuality suffers from the chemistry of melancholy. All individuality is noted in happy or sad cycle. Unique individual expression or mutation is not something that happens all the time or every day. There's a process built into the foundation that says this is something that has to be waited for. And in waiting, there can be a great deal of turmoil. When you come to the second line, it's very much involved in itself and in being what it's being different. Somebody looks inside and sees the difference. In seeing, the second line can be interfered with and brought out of the individual process. Here we have love is light. What a lovely line. Venus exalted is a symbol of beauty. Remember, so much about direction has to do with beauty. There's a joke in this. Everybody knows that beauty is the eye of the beholder. One person's rose is another person's cow pie. That's the way things are. So we have this subjectivity that we are still looking for. What is beauty? What is the beautiful way? What appears to be the beautiful way for some and not necessarily for others? The required harmony between established values and ideals enriches inspiration. The established value is simply to be oneself without interference and to fill one's life. The idea is to maintain the capacity for individual expression. However, the 1.2s don't know, like the natural 2.2, they just can't live that until somebody interferes, because that will always happen to them. On the other side, the Mars side, again, we have the presence of the ego force trying to step in. Desires and passions have their place, but not on the expense of creation in the world. In other words, desire and passion have their place. Save desire and passion for your lover or whatever it is. Put to desire to be unique and put all your passion into being unique is misplaced and always moody. In the White Book, self-expression conditioned by ideas and values, or self-expression limited by desires and passions. In both cases, please understand something. The way that which this line will work is deeply connected to who this is being will meet in their life, because there are people that will deeply interfere with this process. After all, this is a very powerful force. It's a penetrating force. There are those people that love to take that penetrating force and manifest, bring out. The second line, because it does not know that it is unique, is subject to being cranked up, to being pumped up, having the ego built up. You are really unique. You are really terrific. You have to put your desire to passion for this. They are being interfered with instead of being left alone inside. Whenever you're dealing with individuality, the more you let these people alone to do not interfere, the better things are going to be. Look at your own being, any individual gate or channel you have. That is the one place in your life where nobody has a right to interfere. The moment you let them interfere, a very important quality of what you are as being gets lost. Individuality is not here to be interfered with. The collective is about sharing. Individuality is about ultimate empowerment. Okay. Gate 1, line 3. The energy to sustain creative work. I have this one. If you were a bookmaker and you were doing some gambling who was trying to be a mutative success, and you had all the examples in the first gate and various lines, the first thing to recognize here is that there is a joke. The second and the fifth line normally are lines that can be very successful. The second because its quality is seen by others and therefore is recognized. And the fifth because they will always project the best possibilities into the fifth, at least at the beginning. Under normal circumstance, one would think that the second and fifth line of the hexagram would in fact be the ones that are most mutative. It's not true. They are deeply handicapped because they, more than any of the other lines, bring interference into their lives. If you are going to make a bet, you can bet on the first, third, and fourth, and sixth lines. We never know. In the first, third, or fourth, there's always the possibility for mutation because there are better equipped to keep the outside from interfering. The third line is called the energy to sustain creative work. Mars exalted as the symbol of profound need for self-expression, because what happens to these people is the trial and error process, and because they do not know what is on the other side, they learn about interference. Because they have the capacity to adapt, they can learn from that interference. They have the Martian energy to keep pushing through, and they will not let the interference get in the way. This is the first side. When you come to the other side, on the earth, in detriment, material forces can disrupt creativity and lead to overambition. These are people who are actually very talented and who never get to fulfill their potential of their real talent because they get pulled into commercial possibilities. Example, somebody struggling to be a legitimate painter who needs money, gets a job as a graphic artist, and ends up being caught in the world of buying televisions, cars, mortgages, vacations, and so on, and sells out their uniqueness to the mundane plane. This is the other side. Material forces can disrupt creativity and lead to overambition. So in the third line, the exalted side can get past the interference even though it meets it. And in meeting it, it learns a lot because it learns to recognize what happens to its creative process when it's refreshed. When it's interfered with because of the Martian quality. I guess I'm just thinking about freshness. It can keep moving through, but on the other side, materialism disrupts creativity. The moment that you give a young painter $100 for a canvas, you instantaneously changes the way that he produces that art because of the materialism. If they have the detriment, it is going to pull them away from continuing their unique mutative process. One of the most common scenarios in our this world is to have so many young creative people that have been totally messed up by money. It is amazing to see how many careers have been destroyed by easy money. Whether we talk about artists, actors, or rock and roll stars, this is a part of the theme of direction, to wait for the right timing. The second and the third lines have similar problems in dealing with the outside, but the third is better equipped because it can adapt. The lower trigram, in and of itself, has a great deal of difficulty with trying to keep interference away. By the way, there's such a thing as positive interference. That is not to say all interference is negative. Like what the third line learns from being interfered with. There's a Chinese saying, good news, bad news, who knows? The person that interferes with you may turn onto a different track where mutation can take place. We have strange allies in life, but interference is the main theme here. Okay. 1-4. Aloneness as the medium of creativity. When we come to the upper trigram, we come to a very special fourth line. The fourth line has a harmony to the first line, and what we learned in the first line is that the creation is independent of will, not only the will of the artist, but the will of the others and their interference as well. Here we have the transpersonal harmony to that. In other words, what you have in the fourth line is the recognition that there is an eighth gate at the other end of the contribution, and it can be made. The recognition of what's on the other side, something very deep, is at work here. This line is called aloneness as a medium of creativity, not interference as a medium of creativity. The fourth line will externalize that in a one-tracked way. Fourth lines can be very successful and can bring mutation into the world because they are one-tracked. In recognizing the value of aloneness, the line says aloneness as the medium of creativity, not as the medium of contribution, just for the creativity. It is clear that one has to be creative, one needs to be alone. That does not mean that one needs to be alone one's entire life. It means it means that only the creativity cannot be interfered with. The tension of inner light. That is the overview. Think about what the real creative process is. The real creative process is built on that tension of a lifetime. It's an inner tension because the creative process requires tension, and because you have to wait for those moments which mutation really works. The earth exalted is a symbol of personal perspective manifested outside of influence. Jupiter in detriment, where the potential magic of inspiration is diluted. This is a very bizarre line because as far as I could tell, there are only 2 lines in the whole book, 1.4 and 1.6, where you have Jupiter in detriment and there's no explanation given. Nothing. The first thing to realize in the aloneness, creativity must develop outside of influence. What happens in the detriment is not that these people give up the aloneness for their creativity. What happens is that once they have the mutation, they become fixed on externalizing it and give up the possibilities of mutation. An example, let's say there's somebody who has written something and it's really good and they want to get it out to the world. They will stop writing and they will spend their time and creative energy trying to get somebody to recognize it and be very fixed on getting it out to the world. Or they write other books following the same recipe, the same theme, endlessly. In the White Book, there's an explanation of it. The need to influence that abandons aloneness and limits creativity. Please understand, it does not mean that they are all different than the exalted. They end up getting influenced in trying to bring out things to the world, what they have, not the creativity itself. They get caught up in marketing, are trying to get things out, and they lose their creative feel. In order for them to get back into their creativity, they need to go back into their aloneness. 1.5. The energy to attract society. This is one of these 5th lines that are very difficult, as I mentioned earlier. Here you have the projection that is coming from everyone. This is the talented one. The moment there is this constant projection, there's all kinds of interference. You are so talented, why don't you do something? Fifth lines always have present this possibility. In other words, fifth lines can be enormous advantages in life. If you look at your own fifth lines, you realize that this is where people are projecting on you. You will always get the positive projection before you get the negative. That is true of a fifth line. Everybody looks at a fifth line and is hoping for the best out of that fifth line. When they get disappointed, then they project the other way, but you're always given the benefit with a fifth line. In the fifth line of the first hexagram, this assumption that one is creative is very attractive to society. Society likes to know that there are those creative, mutative forces around. It's not necessarily conducive to creativity because it's always pulling interference. Mars exalted for its powerful ego, endurance. The only thing that is left in the fifth line is that everybody is coming to the fifth line saying, "You have such talent," and they end up just riding this ego field. When you see these people, you see them on television or game shows. These are the kind of people that did something once, a long time ago, that everyone at the time projected was really talented and never did a thing again. But they made a living being considered creative ever since. Television is still of these people. Life is too, by the way. The other side is the Uranus in detriment, where eccentricity can handicap endurance. This is the example of Oscar Wilde. He did not give his energy to his talent, but to his life. The actual quote is, "I gave my talent to my life, not my art." We are dealing with a freak circuit here. We are dealing with individuality. We are dealing with the outsider, and what happens to these people is that they just try to live in the outside world, which is to be like a creative person. Society has created the illusion of what a creative person is. Usually they are poor drunks or have terrible problems with women, beat their children, steal money, or take drugs, but do manipulate or produce every once in a while things of beauty that everyone appreciates. If you do not really have the depth of skills, you can still play the role. It's a role gate, after all. These people with the 1.5 in detriment are out there playing the creative role, and everybody's accepting that, except that they get more and more eccentric to get the attention. All individuality is seeking attention. The more eccentric they become, the sooner the whole game will crash. They are famous has-beens. They used to be creative, not anymore. The endurance they put up with and the interference. They have no choice. They attract society. They can be very valuable in that sense because they attract the society. They can get mutation out into the world. Unfortunately for them, that attraction comes so quickly in life that they rarely get a chance to mature as creative forces. So when they end up doing is just being able to handle through the ego, those forces that are constantly trying to interfere with them. There's a famous writer in America named Truman Capote. He wrote in Cold Blood, which made a couple $1 million for him. He was a very bizarre homosexual with very funny habits. He made all this money and could not write anymore. He kept on telling people that he was working on a novel, and he did that for 22 years until he died. When he died and went through all of his papers, the book did not exist, but he had an incredible endurance. There's a famous story about him. He wrote the screenplay for the film African Queer with Humphrey Bogart in those days. When they made him film, he literally had to change the script every day so that they all had to work together. The writers, the actors. Bogart was somebody very crude. Capote had funny little voice and a kind of squeaky, high-pitched voice. He really sounded hilarious when you heard him speak. Bogart was making fun of his voice one evening. Bogart challenged him to an arm wrestle, and Capote beat him. This was something that really humiliated poor Bogart. Capote was quite a funny character. There's a lot of extra stuff in here that I probably didn't need to read. When I start doing Gate 2, I'm going to do this a little bit better. The truth is that what's on the outside wants from creative people is that they do not bring any mutation because it's frightening, but they are allowed to be fools and clowns. They are allowed to be the symbols of creativity, and they are allowed to have creative characters as long as they do not bring mutation. Society does not like mutation. It makes them very uncomfortable. Sometimes the real creative ones are shunned. The whole thing about creative expression as a role, the mystery and the secret of that, goes back to the very first line. The very first line talks about timing is everything. Everything about the creative process is about time, because mutation is something that you can truly appreciate in its time. When mutation takes place, the fact that its mutation takes place in any given moment is a mystery of the vast majority of the planet. It takes a unique individual, and it will have its time. We live in a different kind of age, in an age where we're able to transmit information, images simultaneously, instantaneously. Whenever mutation is taking place in the world. What? Jeez. Sorry, guys. Time is the quality that distinguishes whether a mutation is valuable or not. I doubt very much if anybody 300 years from now will pay any attention to Andy Warhol. I doubt that. But the perspective of whether a mutation really has been of value, whether a mutation has really been effective or not, we are blind to that in our own time. It is one of the things to realize why the artistic spirit longs for immortality. Immortality is something that you can only hear from the creative spirit, because it recognizes that only time, a lot of time, is going to distinguish whether someone is truly great and truly mutative. Only then, and it will take time before the perspective can be there that looks back and says, aha, that was something that really made a difference. That was something that brought a mutation. So it is a question of time. The creative force in the first line recognizes that timing controls the creative process at work. In other words, one cannot push it. One has to wait. It has its own timing, and the fact of the matter is that even whether the mutation has taken place, there is no place for expectation. This is not abstract. This is not collective. This is not about being best. This is simply about the recognition that mutation has taken place, and one lives with that mutation until the end of one's days. The generation after generation, in looking back to see clearly, they valued whether something that was art, beautiful, was the right direction, was a mutation. Only then can be clear. Okay, and as for the last line, the sixth line of Gate 1, objectivity. This leads us to the dilemma of the 1-6, because the 1-6 shows that it sits up there on top of the house of creativity, and it looks across to the 43, which says, hey, patience! All resistance has to be eliminated. This has to get out into the world. The mutation has to take its place. It seems a long time. You will never live long enough to appreciate the impact of that mutation. I know that. I live that. What I share with you, what we work with in human design. There is no possible way that I can see what is going to be, because the perspective on that will take place long after I'm gone. 300 years from now, 400 years from now, somebody may be able to look back at that perspective and see the mutative value and beauty in all of this. I can't be the judge now. I can only be lived as a mutation now, nothing else. The 1-6 is a question of objectivity, clear assessment of creative value, but how do you know? What we consider to be high art today, what will be tomorrow? We don't know that. There are millions and millions of pieces of creativity that are garbage, long forgotten. Not everything can be mutative, so this question of what is creative value becomes an enormous dilemma for the 1-6. it looks out and says, yes, okay, look at it now. It seems to be okay, but how will this stand the test of time? Sorry. Go out in the street and look at one of these new buildings. It may be attractive today in our consciousness. Maybe. What will I look like from the next phase looking back? Will I still have a place? Will we still be pleased to see these buildings survive? I doubt it. Clear assessment of creative value. That's the point. The earth exalted with no explanation. It doesn't not say anything about this. This clear assessment is a lifelong process, and at the end of your life it can only be comparative, and you still do not know. We're talking about mutation. Human beings are so damn selfish. They want everything in their time. We are a species, and a species operates beyond generational borderlines. It is a movement. Mutation is a movement, and it goes far beyond a single lifetime. Any mutation that is of value travels hundreds of generations. This is something that only can be judged by time, by looking back. Pluto in detriment. The risk that subjective appraisal will result in disappointment and creative frustration. Well, you're not going to get a lot of creative expression out of a 1/6 because they recognize clearly what really will be mutative. What happens in the detriment is that there is a subjectivity that comes in, and it will only come early in that life if it pulls them saying, yes, this is it. This is the person who says, this is the most beautiful thing. The subjective appraisal leads to disappointment because it just passes by, and 5 years later, nobody else is interested in it because it's just a fad. It was not really of creative value, and it didn't really bring a mutation. Then the 1/6 stands back and says, okay. In the White Book, the earth is given a value, clarity in creative expression. Remember the relationship between the 6th line and wisdom. Through the 1/6, not involved on a moment-by-moment basis with trying to assert creative uniqueness. It has a much greater process going on. That process can flower in the end. That is the perspective that really sees clearly whether the mutation is something that will have the generational transcendent power to it. Nobody can recognize that better than a 1/6 sitting on the roof of the house looking at the creative impulse of the world. It has the capability of objectivity, saying that mutation will take hold, that will go. I bet that 400 years from now, everyone will be doing that. That is the possibility that lies here as wisdom. It's about time. The nature of bringing love into the world is not about loving your neighbor, it's about loving yourself. This is something that I get to when I talk about the vessel of love. The important thing about bringing real, true creative mutation into the world is simply about these individual forces being themselves. Nothing more, nothing less. What happens is when we have this erroneous need of the ego to assert itself because we need to survive in the material plane. The material plane is feed me now, fill my stomach. Mutation is not about that. It is not. It takes time. Wow. So that was a lot. Definitely don't need to read all of the stuff that Ra put in there. But in Ra sometimes use some words that I think are very important when you're starting out with human design, but they can be disempowering if you don't really understand the depths of it and how it came from, the I Ching, which is thousands of years old, and they had to translate the stories from the Book of Changes through the I Ching into our time now. So I like to also provide some information about the Gate 1 from Quantum Human Design, which I've taken Karen Curry Parker's classes. It's a lot more empowering. So So Gate 1 in Quantum Human Design is called Purpose. And the challenge is to discover a personal, meaningful, and world-changing narrative that aligns with a sense of purpose and mission. I am to learn to love yourself enough to honor the idea that your life is the canvas and you are the artist. What you create with your life is that contribution you give to the world. Mastery is the ability to know the authentic self and a deep connection with a life purpose. An unbalanced expression is an erratic or purposeless life, panic and a feeling of failing at a life mission, pressure to create something unique in the world, struggle to find a purpose, holding on because the purpose feels too big, too much, or even egotistical. Okay, the resiliency keys that Karen Curry Parker uses. There are 9 resiliency keys that basically, if you took all of human design and put it into a blender, there are 9 main archetypes that are what she calls the resiliency keys. So the resiliency keys for this is lovability, saying what needs to be healed, released, aligned, and brought to my awareness for me to be completely open to giving and receiving love. Decisiveness. What needs to be healed, released, aligned, and brought to my awareness for me to create and make a clear and strong choice. Courage. What needs to be healed, released, aligned, and brought to my awareness for me to move forward with courage and faith. And authenticity. What needs to be healed, released, aligned, and brought to my awareness for me to fully express my authentic identity. And the affirmation for the Gate 1 is, my life is an integral part of the cosmos and the divine plan. I honor my life and I know that being the full expression of who I am is the purpose of my life. The more I am who I am, the more I create a frequency of energy that supports others in doing the same. I commit to exploring all of who I am. Further contemplations. Am I fully expressing my authentic self? What needs to be healed, released, aligned, or brought to my awareness for me to more deeply express my authentic self? Where am I already expressing who I am? Where have I settled or compromised? What needs to change? Do I feel connected to my life purpose? What do I need to do to deepen that connection? Nice. I love how Karen Curry Parker uses the quantum language, which is very empowering. And the science of prayer, basically, with those questions, basically like the universe is a feedback loop. So instead of, saying, I want this to happen, or it's more like asking a question and not figuring out with your mind, just asking the question, like those, like what needs to be healed, released, and aligned for me to be in my purpose. Not thinking about it with the mind, just letting it go. And you can always use tapping, like the quantum alignment system that Karen Curry Parker does is great as well. So anyway, I just made my first video. I just want to see how it is. I'm gonna watch it now. So thank you all for sticking with me through this. I hope it was helpful, and the next time I will not read all of that because this one pretty long. 44 minutes. Wow. Okay, I might just post it anyway. All right. Thank you. Bye.